and welcome. My name is Nancy Hoffman-Vaniak, CEO of the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber, and welcome to the 7th Annual State of the Valley. I hope you enjoyed the networking reception, or as we lovingly refer to it, the Schmoozapalooza. I want to open our program today with hope and optimism. It has been a true honor to walk alongside our Valley businesses through this pandemic. As you've likely heard me say, I am an optimistic realist. I see the challenges we are currently facing, but I know how resilient the San Fernando Valley is. And I look forward to our region coming back ready to build on the other side. Now, more than ever, we are proud to be SFV. Since March, our chamber has not skipped a beat, and we've been busier than ever. We hit the ground running, creating a nationwide coalition, the Save Small Business Coalition, consisting of over 160 chambers and business organizations, with our recovery fund bill currently being reviewed on Capitol Hill. We've also joined and helped lead countless other coalitions, as the needs of the business community are varied and abundant. From the start of the pandemic, we launched a resource website to create a hub with all of the important and relevant information businesses need. And thanks to our talented members and partners, we have been able to offer excellent free webinars to keep businesses moving forward, as well as hosting weekly networking events to connect businesses, not just here in the Valley, but throughout the Southland. As you can see, we've been very busy working for you, and we're proud to keep doing it. Now, let's get the show on the road. Let me introduce today our moderator, Alex Cohen. A California resident since she was 2 years old, Alex is a fellow Valley girl. She grew up right here in the Valley and now calls Northeast LA her home. For several years, she played roller derby with the LA Derby Dolls under the name Axles of Evil. She started off her career as a radio producer and director, and is now one of the anchors of Your Morning and the host of Inside the Issues and SoCal in 17 on Spectrum News 1. This veteran reporter holds the Golden Mike Award for Best Live Coverage of a News Story and the LA Press Club Award for Best Anchor, to name a few. When Alex isn't working on her next big project, you can find her drinking lavender lattes from the Little Flower Candy Company in Pasadena, or watching movies with her 2 kids and husband. Please join me in welcoming Axles of Evil, Alex Cohen.
Hello and welcome to the 7th Annual State of the Valley Lunch. I'm so proud to be a part of this platform and to help draw attention to what is happening within the business community. I'm thrilled you could join us today to hear from 6 of the LA City Council members who represent the San Fernando Valley. State of the Valley would not exist without some incredible sponsors. Not only have they made it possible to bring this important programming to you, but their generosity has also allowed donations of more than 200 meals to Valley healthcare workers. Today's sponsors are listed on the sponsor tab, so please join me in a moment of virtual applause. And now I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel of council members. Representing District 6, Council President Nuri Martinez. Representing District 2, we have Councilmember Paul Krikorian. Representing District 3, Councilmember Bob Blumenfield. Representing District 4, we have Councilmember David Rue. Representing District 5, Councilmember Paul Koretz. And representing District 12, we have Councilmember John Lee. Now let's begin. Today's format will be a Q&A session with topics that we've gathered from businesses and key leaders throughout the San Fernando Valley. Each city council member will have 2 minutes to answer an opening question. Then we will move on to an additional round of specific questions which will be given to certain members of the panel. They will be given a chance to respond for 90 seconds, and we'll end with a final question and closing statements. Each candidate will have 2 minutes there. We do have a timer on the screen and a bell that will ring exactly 10 seconds before the time limit. So we begin now with the topic of 2020, coronavirus, and what you all have been doing in response. Panelists, the pandemic has taken a huge toll on all of us, especially on our small businesses. Please provide us with one example of something that you've done to help businesses struggling to survive, and we'd also like to know what you see as the most insurmountable challenge to our economy as the pandemic continues. Let's begin now with Council President Nuri Martinez.
Let me begin by acknowledging how proud I am of the work that this council has done during this COVID crisis, particularly the members representing the San Fernando Valley. A few efforts to support businesses that we worked on include the launching of our senior meal program. This effort was led by Councilmember Krikorian and was a great way to help our seniors and spur economic activity for taxis and restaurants that saw a major decline in business. In addition, the city launched an al fresco program to allow restaurants to create outdoor dining and open their businesses for service again. Councilmember Ru is working to extend that. By now, you should already know that I am particularly concerned about helping disadvantaged communities and communities of color. I established the ad hoc COVID recovery committee to make sure that we don't lose focus on those communities, including those businesses. Through that commitment, I've allocated $42 million to help small minority, immigrant, veteran, and women-owned businesses in Los Angeles. And because childcare is so important to getting people back to work, I dedicated $30 million to childcare relief. And there is no childcare without childcare providers. So $20 million goes directly to those small businesses, either as grants designated to keep their businesses open or as direct payment for parents to enroll in our $10 million voucher program.
Next up, let's turn to Councilmember John Lee. Your 2 minutes begins now.
Thank you, Alex. You know, when the first round of PPPs, I think we were all a little disappointed when we saw a major chunk of that money that we all thought was going to go to mom and pop businesses actually go to publicly traded companies. And so what we did is we went out and looked for different partners to focus on. We knew that small businesses were making decisions. Well, they may not be paying rent right now immediately, they would have to pay it at some point. And we wanted to relieve that burden. So we started providing small interest-free loans. So $5,000 to $25,000 loans over a 5-year period of time to small businesses, to any small business in our area that wanted to apply for it. Because, you know, we wanted to make sure that they understood that, you know, they would have our backing, but also you didn't have to make your first payment for 6 months. And so I'm proud to say that at this point, I think we've given out about $700,000 to our small businesses, just to make sure, because I want to make sure that when this is all over, our economy and our small economy and CD12 gets up and back and running.
Thank you so much. Let's turn now to Councilmember Koretz. Your 2 minutes begins.
Well, thank you, and thank you for having this great program. My primary mission in trying to help business has been to really try to help everyone defeat the disease. I did a motion in January to ask the city to look at the potential threats. More importantly, I did a motion to require masks of anyone outside the home, because our research showed that this could dramatically reduce the spread. That's now become a scientific consensus. The mayor eventually followed that direction and declared that masks were required. I'm still pushing, and I think a missing piece is to actually enforce that with penalties. It's not the most pleasant thing in the world, but I think it would be the step that would get us towards where we need to be. Japan has almost no spread. It's because of the respect they have for each other and masks. With businesses, I think we've all done a lot. Some of the things I'm doing and have done with al fresco dining, the city has run out of funds to pay for that. So I'm paying for al fresco dining arrangements in various places in my district from my discretionary funds. We also help to get PPE to hospitals and other venues that needed it from places that didn't. Early on, we found that the dental offices had a lot of PPE and masking while they were closed. So we got those to hospitals like Encino Hospital and other places to help deal with the issue. We also called every senior citizen in our district individually to see who needed meals. And we set up a meals program with local businesses to help them and help the seniors at the same time.
Thank you for that response, Councilmember. And just a reminder too, part of the question is, what do you see as the most insurmountable challenge to the economy as the pandemic continues? Next up, we'll hear from Councilmember Blumenfield.
Great, Alex, thank you so much for the question. And I want to thank Nancy and the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber of Commerce for putting this forum together. Chambers are ever more important, especially during this pandemic. And so events like this are incredibly important. I'm trying to support my local chambers, both financially by giving them some additional funds through my discretionary account, which we've done, and in every other way, because they are helping keep our businesses together. And the first part of your question is, what have we done? What can we do as a city? And we are doing a heck of a lot. As Councilmember Lee mentioned, we've got some private efforts, and I joined him as he moved forward the Change Reaction. We've got them going in my district as well, doing private loans. As a city, though, we've also, we put aside more than $100 million for small business loans, which we all voted for and supported, which is critical. And that is helping a lot of small businesses. The other piece to getting the funds is making sure that the businesses know about the funds that are out there, because all the money that we're putting in, the federal money is so exponentially so much more. So we need to position, if we can position ourselves to take down 1/10 more, or 1/10 of 1% more of the federal money, which is in the billions category, that's more money than all of our programs combined. So part of what I've been doing is making sure that our economic development centers are prepared for that. I see I'm coming to the end of my time. So what is the most insurmountable issue here? I mean, it is the fact that some of these losses are going to be deep. We're going to lose companies that have taken years to build. And it's a matter of trying to keep it together through these months until we can get back up and running. But it's like when we had the earthquake, people feared that we would become ghost towns, and we were able to change that by active engagement. And that's what we're doing here. I see my time is up. I've got a lot to say about this. My economic development community action team sprung into action, as well as my emergency preparedness team, but I'll talk about that on another question. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember David Rue.
I think I am very proud to sit on the city council because our city council acted promptly. And it wasn't just one of us, but all of us worked together to respond to the COVID crisis. Earlier on, back in March, myself and Council President Nuri Martinez, along with several of our board of supervisors, acted quickly to cut through the red tape and all the bureaucracy to acquire tests. And the city of Los Angeles was one of the first cities in the nation to receive 20,000 COVID testing, which spurred all the COVID testing that we see today. But we as a council acted together quickly to pass the eviction moratorium, which also extended to commercial evictions as well. And because the bottom line is, for businesses, in order for them to stay afloat, any support we could give them through eviction moratorium, through our alfresco program, which is the outdoor dining, which is so popular, and also introduced motion to see how we could keep it permanent after the Safer at Home order is lifted, to introducing motions to phase out the gross receipts tax, especially for our restaurants and those businesses most affected by COVID, to our $50 million program to wage replacement for those essential workers who test positive so that they could stay home and recover instead of trying to work and spread the coronavirus because they're trying to feed their family. We also have introduced a $100 million local PPP program for Los Angeles businesses. And like many of my other colleagues, I've partnered with numerous nonprofits like the Jewish Family Free Loan Association to give loans for small businesses interest-free. But the most insurmountable fact of this coronavirus is the federal government. We need the federal government to step up. We are facing a cliff. The state government is already in deficit. There is nothing that we will be able to do unless the federal government stops playing politics with this federal aid money and give it to where people need it, whether it's directly to Angelenos in their pockets, directly to Main Street, or to the city of Los Angeles so that we can help Angelenos.
And now, Councilmember Krikorian.
Well, thank you, Alex, for the question, and thank you very much for having all of us here to talk about business in an unprecedented time of challenge. Obviously, this is a time unlike any that any of us have ever experienced, and it has required emergency response, and it's also required rethinking the way the city interacts with business for the longer term as well, because as we emerge from the COVID pandemic, it's going to be important, especially important, for us to create an environment in Los Angeles that is positive for business. So as a number of my colleagues have mentioned, one of the first things that we did was passed the $11 million microloan program that I initiated along with the mayor. We then supplemented that with additional funding through the CARES Act and otherwise critical lifeline for many businesses that were teetering on the edge. The Alfresco program that members have mentioned has been a real lifeline for our hospitality industry, for our restaurants who have suffered so badly, and their employees, of course, who've suffered along with them. And I had the first Alfresco program in the city that actually closed traffic lanes in order to set up tables for these restaurants to be able to thrive, and they've done very well. So we just secured an additional $2 million in funding to be able to expand that program citywide. But a lot of what I think we have done as well is focus on how do we protect small businesses from government. And in March, when there was a big rush to try to, in the council, to try to address the many needs that the city would have, some of the policies would have really badly impacted small businesses. For example, there was a mandatory supplemental sick leave proposal that was put forward, which makes sense to help protect our workers who are struggling with COVID, but it would have been devastating for small businesses, and we would have lost many of our small businesses if they had to incur that extra expense right then. So I proposed an amendment, which I'm glad that the council passed, to exclude businesses below 500 employees from that supplemental sick leave. In addition, we took steps to ensure that building and safety would not be doing the kinds of enforcements that they normally would do unless they pertain to really critical safety issues. Because when a business is struggling, a restaurant is struggling, it puts a sign out in front to tell people that it's still open. It shouldn't be penalized by the city for doing what it needs to do to try to maintain its lifeline. In terms of what
I'm sorry, the time has run out for this, but I do want to assure everyone that we will be continuing to look at what is going on with restaurants later on during this event. I want to move to our individual questions, staying here with the coronavirus pandemic and some of the other facets of what is happening right now. This is a question for Councilmember Paul Koretz regarding evictions. With millions of Californians unemployed, many tenants here in LA are unable to pay their rent. Where do you personally stand on eviction moratoriums, and what would you suggest that landlords, especially the smaller landlords, the mom and pops, do to help counter this financial hit?
Well, this is a difficult situation that we find ourselves in, and we try to balance the needs of tenants to keep them from being evicted and winding up off the streets, and to keep landlords from losing their property, their mortgages. We've put in an eviction moratorium, and so for a lengthy period of time, tenants have been protected from being evicted for non-payment of rent. When that period ends, they will be able to repay that over a more gradual period of time. We've also created a fund to help subsidize some of the tenants that can't afford their rent, which helps both them and the landlords at the same time. It's a difficult circumstance that we find ourselves in. There's been a movement to ask that we completely eliminate rents and allow people during this pandemic to live rent-free. That is clearly something that we would not be able to do from a legal standpoint. And it also, again, would put a lot of our small landlords out of business. So we're trying to balance that need. I think we're doing well so far, but we have the potential for a great number of evictions once that moratorium is out. There's also been a certain number of violations which we try to deal with, but we also realize that some landlords may come up with reasons for eviction that are not legitimate, and we have a program to legally defend folks who are facing unjust evictions. Hopefully all of that helps and we keep people off the street.
Thank you for that answer. And turning now to Councilmember Lee, of course, it's not just residents who are tenants, there are also businesses who rent their spaces. And what do you think can and should be done to help keep them alive and afloat while not at the same time penalizing the owners of those commercial buildings?
Thanks, Alex. You know, what we have is, when I was talking earlier about our business loan program, our business relief fund, but on top of that, we also have a team of landlords themselves, people who speak landlord language. And that's another part of the service, that they go and actually talk with the landlords of these, whether they be strip malls or, you know, shopping centers, and try to, you know, make them understand that if this business goes out, if this business leaves their property, there's not a line of businesses waiting for them. So we all need to be working in this together. And so we've been very successful in trying to renegotiate leases. Now, of course, you know, you're going to have certain people that there's absolutely no flexibility with. And I understand some of this is their income. You know, that this may have been their life savings, and you know, they rely on this income. But I think we all need to be a little bit flexible. And so, you know, that's what this program has been a huge success of, you know, going in and talking to them. And, you know, I'm very encouraged, because I think people know that to get through this, we're all going to have to, you know, play our parts.
As mentioned earlier, there has been a lot of interest in the alfresco program for restaurants to be able to serve their customers outside in spaces they have not traditionally been able to do so in the past. Councilmember Krikorian, I promised that we would get back to this, and here we are, and this question is for you. As we've heard already today, the money is run out for this, and I'm curious, you did mention raising some additional funding, but how do you plan, and how long do you plan to keep this program alive? And what would you say to those restaurants who say the hurdles to actually get a permit to do this are too much, given the extent of the emergency situation that businesses are in? They should be allowed to do this right away.
Well, thank you, Alex. We, first of all, just this week, we in fact secured an additional $2 million in funding to keep the alfresco program going. It's been an enormous success. It's allowed social distancing. It's allowed people an opportunity to enjoy their local restaurants in the neighborhoods again, and it's been a lifeline for those businesses and for their employees. So I hope that we'll continue to press forward with this, and obviously we'll be able to a much greater degree if we get the assistance that my colleagues have discussed from Washington. But we have to do more for the restaurant industry for the longer haul as well. So one of the initiatives that I'm working on right now, which is working its way through the system, is changes to the restaurant beverage program to help expedite the process by which sit-down restaurants can receive alcoholic beverage permits. So it's an expedited program so that if a restaurant agrees to specific conditions, standard conditions, which are actually more restrictive than what happens in a typical CUB process, then they'll have expedited treatment. The cost of this process will go from $14,000 on average down to about $4,000. And the delay in getting a CUB will go down from nearly a year to a matter of weeks or months. So this is the sort of thing that I talked about earlier, where government needs to kind of get out of the way. We need to protect our neighborhoods, protect the public, but we can do that in a way that's not so burdensomely bureaucratic that it causes businesses to throw up their hands in frustration and say, I'll go someplace else rather than Los Angeles. As chair of the Ad Hoc Jobs Committee, I've been focusing on those kinds of solutions, and I believe that's what's going to pay dividends for us for the long haul as we recover from the pandemic.
Thank you for that answer. And turning now to Councilmember Blumenfield, let's talk about some of the other businesses that exist in many of our neighborhoods. Of course, the Alfresco program gives eateries the opportunities to serve customers sometimes in parking spaces, and that takes away perhaps parking spaces from neighboring businesses. There are some businesses such as tattoo shops and nail salons and spas that offer massage that have been really hard hit. What do you plan to do to help these other businesses try to survive as we look at a pandemic that might be going on for quite some time?
It's a great question. There's two sides to it. One is providing the business assistance, and we've talked about that through programs, the direct city programs, the federal programs, the local programs like Change Reaction that Councilmember Lee mentioned. And then the other is doing things to streamline government, as essentially get out of the way, as Councilmember Krikorian mentioned. And specifically to that point, Council adopted two of my motions to have planning do two things that would help these other kinds of businesses. One is to extend the expiring CUBs and CUPs for 12 months. Because this is something all renewals of this sort generally get approved. There's not a reason to make the businesses go through the trouble and expense of filing these renewals during the economic crisis. So we should allow the businesses to focus their attention on staying alive and doing the work that they need to do. And this likely will be extended to the zoning administrator approvals for other discretionary processes as well. The other thing, and you mentioned parking, was to allow changes of use without triggering parking requirements. Sadly, a lot of businesses are not going to be able to weather this storm, and we expect a lot of commercial vacancies. So to make it easier to fill these spaces, the motion I mentioned allows existing businesses to expand or new businesses to move into existing businesses without a change in use that would trigger additional parking requirements. So just to give you a sense of that, in most of the city, if a restaurant or a gym or yoga studio wants to move into a commercial space that was formerly occupied by a store or office, they've got to provide additional on-site parking. A lot of the older buildings, they don't have this parking, which requires them to file a variance or another discretionary approval, which is expensive and time-consuming. The motion would allow these changes of use without requiring additional parking for any business that goes into a vacant space during the 12 months, during the pandemic and during the 12 months after the emergency. The parking requirement would be permanently waived. So some of these things require changes in the planning code. They can't happen as quickly as I want, but we're moving forward on them. And I plan on working with planning to include other provisions to make sure that we can respond, we can streamline, we can get out of the way that businesses that need just a little bit extra, and we can also, on the other end, provide the assistance for the businesses that we can.
Thank you. Our time is up on that answer. We turn now to Council President Nury Martinez and a question about right to recall. At the end of April, the City Council adopted a right to recall ordinance requiring employers to make a written offer of employment to workers who have been laid off for any available job for which the employee qualifies. Some businesses do see this as unnecessary red tape at a time when they are already struggling. What is the thought behind this, and what can be done for employers who see this as unnecessary bureaucracy?
The original motion on recall and retention applied to all industries. However, the council narrowed down the scope so that the policy would apply to hospitality workers, airport workers, and janitorial workers, workers who are often the lowest end of the pay scale for these industries. I'm unapologetically sympathetic to service workers. My dad was one of them. We know that the hospitality industry has had massive layoffs, and we want to make sure that the workers had protections. These are the same workers who are the backbone to the success of this industry in Los Angeles. Airport, hotel, and other businesses have received millions of dollars in federal assistance, which is good. We're trying to strike a balance to assist workers as well. When these businesses become operational again, we want to make sure that the employees who worked there for years have an opportunity to continue working if their jobs remain. There are employees who have dedicated decades to their employers. If they now have to start from the bottom and lose seniority when other employees in that same industry do not, that doesn't seem like a fair policy. The intent of the ordinance was not to inconvenience businesses. We need to help businesses, and in this case, help those workers who are not at the top end salary-wise, other industries, but who have invested years in the business's success. It's a small step to ask workers if they would like to return before hiring a completely new staff. Retaining staff with institutional knowledge and experience can benefit the businesses.
This question is for Councilmember David Ryu on the topic of minimum wage. As of July 1st, the minimum wage for employees working in the city of Los Angeles increased to $15 an hour for larger businesses, $14.25 per hour for smaller employers. Has there been any thought given to revisit this in light of the toll that COVID has taken on businesses?
Well, I still think the minimum wage should stand. The rate rising of the minimum wage should stand. I can't speak for my colleagues, but I think this is a good thing because we got to also understand people are struggling. Everyone is struggling. Having the ability to even have a job is a privilege. But when you have a job, the fact that even before the pandemic was in Los Angeles, the cost of living was so high. People had to double up. Families had to double, triple up to even try to make rent. So the fact is, we don't want to make it a race to the bottom. We want to make sure that we're helping those vulnerable communities, essential workers who are literally risking their lives every single day just to make sure that our city is still running, deserves the minimum wage. However, what we can do in the city of LA, as we spoke before, is phasing out the gross receipts tax, especially for restaurants, as a motion introduced by my colleague, Councilmember Monica Rodriguez, and I wholeheartedly seconded. I think that's only the first step. I think we could try to help the bottom line of small businesses, small to mid-sized businesses, by trying to reduce their various cost factors, whether it's through eviction moratorium, whether it's through freezing the rates of water and power, which I've also introduced a motion on as well, or trying to phase out the gross receipts tax, especially for those business sectors that are most impacted, like restaurants. These are other aspects that we can do. Along with our $100 million local PPP program that tries to augment and supplement where the federal government has yet again failed. So there are many ways we can help small to mid-sized businesses, but I think minimum wage is something that we have to make sure that we protect for our workers.
Thank you very much. Our next question for Councilmember Krikorian. Los Angeles has become such an expensive place to live. Traffic, even in the midst of this pandemic, has once again become a huge burden, which makes it really tough for business owners to attract and retain workers here in the city of LA. What do you think needs to happen to make LA more affordable?
Well, I think one of the biggest drivers, of course, of our affordability in Los Angeles, or lack of affordability, is the cost of housing and commercial real estate costs as well. But the housing costs in Los Angeles make us one of the most unaffordable housing markets in the entire country. And of course, that's a driver of our homelessness challenge. It's a factor that businesses take into account when they make their decision about siting facilities. And so we have to attack the lack of affordable housing in Los Angeles. I sit on the housing committee. One of the goals that I think we all have to just come to grips with is we need a lot more housing stock at every price point. We need to develop more housing in the city of Los Angeles. Now, we're doing that already, I think, more than some of our surrounding cities are. And other cities, smaller cities that neighbor us, need to do their fair share as well. But we're making use of transit-oriented communities, especially in places like my district around the North Hollywood Metro Station, where we're significantly investing in housing, much greater density, walkable communities that are near transit. When we continue to invest in placemaking like that increases our housing stock, then we're making Los Angeles a more attractive place to live, and we're providing the housing stock that is going to put a constraint on the spiking increase of housing costs. So that, I would say, is number one. Transportation and is also a big driver. I serve on the Metro board. I don't have time to talk about this now, but we're making billions of dollars of investments in getting people out of their cars and into transit and making getting from place to place more affordable as well.
And this next question is for Councilmember Koretz. This pandemic has demonstrated how woefully understaffed we are as a city when it comes to nurses and other healthcare professionals. What plans do you have to encourage training and education for these very essential workers?
Well, it's not exactly in our purview as a city, but actually I've worked on the nursing shortage as one element for a number of years. I did legislation when I was in the state legislature to create funding for nursing programs, which were closing down rather than opening. I wasn't entirely successful, but my staff person that focused on that wound up going to work for the governor and creating the program that I worked with her to create legislatively. And so we were able to do things like reopening the UCLA nursing program. I think those encouragements need to be done. I know there are programs such as one at Charles Drew University where they're looking at expanding their medical training and at the same time to enable us to have more Black doctors, which is a shortage of both equity and the ability to help treat in their communities. So I've done it. It's not necessarily a city focus or responsibility. The county deals with healthcare, but I think we encourage such things somewhat from the sidelines. Sometimes we fund things that we shouldn't have to as a city, but we're very aware of the problem, and I know I've been working on it. I know other council members have as well. So it's a larger societal shortfall that we don't have enough doctors and nurses and professionals, but it's certainly something that I've been very focused on.
And our next question goes to Councilmember David Ryu. As we all know, Los Angeles is currently facing a monumental budget deficit. How big do you expect it to be, and how do you intend to make up for the fiscal loss?
You know, this is probably with our budget chair, also representing the Valley, Councilman Paul Krikorian, who has been leading the charge on this and really keeping us fiscally responsible during these difficult times. He will probably have a better outlook. But I'm going to be frank, you know, no matter what we do, we are facing a cliff. We need the federal government to step up. This is, since the Great Depression, probably the biggest impact to our economy, not just locally, but nationally and globally. And this is why we need a New Deal style response from the federal government. We need them to stop playing politics and deliver for the American people, deliver for Angelenos. I don't care if the aid comes directly to the pockets of Angelenos or directly to Main Street, to our small and mid-sized businesses, or to local governments like ourselves so we can provide for our Angelenos. Because right now we are facing a cliff. We do need, this is a time when everyone is scaling back for government to step up, provide more services, not less services. We've pretty much depleted majority of our reserves. You know, we are trying to do austere measures. We're working with our partners in labor who has agreed to delay furloughs through taking cuts themselves. So this is an opportunity where everybody is pitching in, but we are facing a cliff. And without federal or state assistance, and at this point, the state is also already on the cliff. So this is a area where we are trying to figure out what ways we can to plug holes and provide services for Angelenos. I have come up with innovative programs like the Federal Reserve Program, drawing down funds from them. However, this is, again, needs the approval of the federal government. No matter what we try to do, it is going to be the federal government who ultimately has the final decision-making say.
Thank you. And now we will turn to our closing statements, and let's perhaps go in the reverse order of where we started. Your final 2 minutes to talk about the future of the state of the Valley. And let's begin with Councilmember Krikorian.
Well, thank you very much, Alex, and thank you again to the Chamber. Alex, you started our discussion today by asking what changes or what challenges may be insurmountable. And I'm going to suggest that if we work together with vision for the future, nothing is insurmountable in the city of Los Angeles. I took over as budget chair for the City Council 8 years ago, and that was still in the middle of the Great Recession. It was at a time when former Mayor Reardon said that it was inevitable that the city would declare bankruptcy. We should just go ahead and do it. Well, we didn't. We built up the strongest reserve that the city has ever had in the entire history of the city of Los Angeles. And it was that reserve that's helped to keep us afloat right now as we face this recession. And we did that mainly by being visionary in cutting our expenses and in boosting business and helping to give our economy here a jump start that would create the jobs and revenues that would keep us going. So we've been here before, not with this exact challenge, but with facing similar kinds of challenges and working with the business community, we've been able to get through it. This is a time of challenge, but it's also a time of opportunity. In the future, if you look forward a few years, we have the Olympics coming, we have a number of major events that are coming. And I've made sure that small businesses are going to be able to participate fully in the procurement for those events so that we can continue to get that capital invested in our local businesses to stimulate our economy and create new jobs. So I believe that with the opportunities that are coming up, so long as we continue to support businesses, and I've created a small business commission now for the first time in history, so businesses actually get to participate in the formation of policy. If we continue to look to the business community and listen to the business community, we'll get through this difficult time and we'll emerge on the other end even stronger than before. And this will be a bright time for Los Angeles in the decade ahead.
Let's move now to Councilmember Koretz.
I agree with Councilmember Krikorian. I think the Valley has a bright future if we all work together. And we do face some problems, certainly in the short term, in addition to the fact that our budget is short and we'll have to take some significant steps to correct that. I think to get the business community back up and running, the one thing we have to do is actually help defeat COVID directly. The last time we opened up LA County, we opened up too quickly and without the right steps, and we had to go back and shut down. We don't want to have that happen again. And the business community is large and I think has the ability to impact, both in terms of reopening with all of the protocols in place. There are restaurants that have done a great job of doing their outdoor dining, and there are restaurants that I see with tables right next to each other and in all likelihood contributing to spread. We have to all do our part as businesses. We also have to help get the word out about masking. That has always been the solution. It's still the solution. Even with vaccines, we expect that without stronger masking participation, we will not be able to wipe out the disease. So make sure your customers all wear masks, your employees all wear masks, and you get the word out to everybody that you know about the importance. Masking equals business reopening and success and an end to COVID. So it's the most critical element. We've known that for months. We've got to put our money where our mouth is and make sure we have full compliance and cooperation with these protocols.
And closing statements now from Councilmember Ryu.
Thank you, Alex, and thank you, Nancy, and of course the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber of Commerce for hosting this during this very difficult times. You know, when all else fails, when everyone is cutting back, that's when government needs to step up. You know, first and foremost, we are a civil society, we are Los Angeles, and what we did as a city council immediately when this coronavirus hit was take care of those who are the most vulnerable among us. Because if we don't take care of those who are the most vulnerable, it will only become worse. If we had a wave of evictions, we would see only homelessness even rise even higher than it already is. And so that's why we acted quickly to help those who are the most vulnerable, who are the most impacted by this coronavirus. Now we are heavily focusing on economic recovery. Small businesses are the backbone of our economy, and they are more so during this post-COVID time that we hope to see soon. And I know the situation looks bleak. I know it is a very scary time. We see businesses going out of business left and right. But at the same time, I know that we will bounce back. I know, as my colleagues agree with, that we will come back even better, because from this crisis are advantages. Issues like telecommuting that we've been trying to push as a whole for decades is now coming to fruition. I introduced a motion. I think both the public sector and the business sector are seeing the advantages of it. We can use this opportunity to grow businesses and grow our economy in newer and different ways in the 21st century. So, you know, this is an opportunity for Los Angeles to come back stronger and better, an opportunity for us to streamline how we do business, cut red tape, tackle homelessness like the emergency crisis that it is, so that we will come back to an even better city of Los Angeles.
Closing statement from John Lee.
Thanks, Alex. You know, I think it's really important, and I think we talked about it during this meeting, is, you know, it's important, and the city has taken a lot of focus on employees, making sure that their jobs are safe, the right of recall, the retention ordinances. But we also have to remember the businesses that are involved here. These are the businesses that provide the jobs that these people are going back to. So when we have to have that, you know, flexibility, you know, I was proud that when, you know, we talked about restaurants and the right to recall, you know, I think the original proposal was something like 10 days that they had to give employees time to respond to, for lack of a better term, you know, when to answer the bell when they're asked to come back to work. You know, jobs are going to need to be flexible. I mean, businesses are going to need to be flexible. Hotels are changing formats, restaurants are changing. Everybody is sort of trying to reimagine what, you know, their business is going to look like after all this is over. And I think as a city, you know, we need to make sure that we are focusing on that. And I think that, you know, we also here in the city as council members, we need to remember that, you know, when there's a problem that we are facing, we tend to always look to the business community to figure that problem out for us. And we need to do a better job at trying to take a look at our own house. You know, our own responsibilities of what we're doing here in the city. Look at what core services that we're supposed to be providing in the city. And to, you know, it's going to be tough. You know, I don't know what revenue is going to look like next month. I especially don't know what revenues are going to look like in April. And so we just need to, you know, Councilman Kokorian is doing an amazing job at running this budget, but we need to look at it month by month and make sure that we are serving the business community and all the residents of the city of Los Angeles. Oh, and thank you, Nancy. I really appreciate you having us today. And thank you, Alex, for being our host.
Closing statements now from Councilmember Blumenfield.
Alex, thank you. Thank you for putting this, doing a great job of keeping us on track and asking great questions. So one of the things we're hearing today, there are so many critical issues affecting us right now. We are really at an inflection point in many respects, whether it's the COVID pandemic, homelessness, and I didn't get a chance, but I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the homelessness efforts that are going on across the city, but in my district, where we're right now in the middle of a pilot program to get everyone housed who is under all of the freeways in my district. And we plan on having that done by November 16th, possibly by next week. And major efforts to get people off the streets with new housing. But also we have the economy that is just tanking. We have institutional racism that is coming to the fore with the demonstrations. We have issues of police reform. All of these, the bedrock of all of this is our economy, which is faltering and we're having these tremendous drops where, as a city, we're looking at potential layoffs. And looking at furloughs right now. We've managed to postpone that, but if we get down to it, we might have to do layoffs. So we're in a very critical time for our business, and all of these things affect our businesses. The businesses are part of the community. They are the small businesses, the economic driver for our economy. And that's why the chamber is so important. That's why the work that you all do here is important, because without having a strong economy, all of these other things are in peril, and all of these other things are impacted. So there's a tremendous amount of issues. This is a very unique point in time. I didn't even mention the elections and all of the craziness there that adds to it all. But at least we've got our chambers going well, and I appreciate it. And I want to, continue to work hand in glove with our business community. My time is out, but anyone who's listening to this, you have any issues, please contact me in the office, and we want to work with you across the city, but especially in the 3rd District. Thank you.
And next, let's hear from Council President Nury Martinez.
First off, it's a shame that we can't be together in person as we have in the past. I'm joining you from our City Council chambers, where unlike other legislative bodies on the state and federal levels that have delayed their meetings for weeks and months, we have been holding meetings since this pandemic. As Council President, as a Councilwoman for Council District 6, I made it a priority that we continue to do the business at hand. Despite COVID-19 risks that we all face, my colleagues and I are working to make sure that we continue to do the people's business and that the Valley gets its resources it deserves. So much has changed in these past 7 months. As a city, we have supported unprecedented initiatives to help people get through the worst of this. From a rent relief program to assist 50,000 renters and property owners throughout the city, to the al fresco program to allow outdoor dining for our restaurants, to providing $42 million in grant funding for our local businesses. And in the district, we're working with businesses and nonprofits to assist our Valley residents with food and resources that they need to get through the pandemic, and I want to thank them all. We are working as hard as we can to keep the city working. Our work continues with preparing Los Angeles and the Valley for the decade to come with transit projects, permanent supportive housing, and investment in parks and green space. During this pandemic and beyond, the scale of some of the major issues facing Los Angeles, including the San Fernando Valley, requires solutions that the city alone cannot provide. The city, county, state, and federal authorities must come together to commit the resources necessary to address the systemic issue of housing and homelessness. As we work towards solutions, we are also going to need the input of our Valley neighborhoods, our stakeholders, and including our business community. I look forward to continue to work with all of you to serve the San Fernando Valley. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone so much, especially to our council members for their leadership during this incredibly difficult time. I really look forward to this upcoming year, and we all look forward to working with you to create a stronger bond between the city of Los Angeles and the business community. Thanks so much once again. Stay safe and be well.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Alex, and thank you, council members. My name is Steve Rydeen, and I'm the board chair for the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber of Commerce. We are so proud to provide this platform to you and draw attention to what is happening here in the Valley. Thank you for joining us today and hearing from the Los Angeles City Council members who cover the San Fernando Valley. We'd also like to thank our partner chambers, North Valley Regional, Encino, Sherman Oaks, and West Valley Warner Center chambers for their support today and throughout this pandemic. Please know that the Greater San Fernando Valley Chamber is here for you. We will continue to work tirelessly for you and fight for our Valley.